Number 5. Kepler-62e. After monitoring the interference of the light reaching Earth from a star called Kepler-62, researchers working on the Kepler Space Telescope were able to determine that there are 5 planets orbiting the star. While most of them are way too hot to be anything like Earth, there was one that stood out, known as Kepler-62e. It's the furthest out of all the planets around the star, that's approximately 1,200 light-years away from us, and is in the Lyra constellation. It's around the same distance from its star as Mercury is from ours, which means that it orbits once every 122 Earth days. But because the star is weaker, the environment is far less hostile. The planet is classified as a super-Earth because it's about 60% larger, and because of its size, there's a slight possibility that instead of being rocky, it's made up of gas. Still, it's most likely that it is a planet like our own, and one where the temperatures are, on average, around 26 degrees Fahrenheit, which allows for water to exist as a liquid and could potentially support life. Number 4. Tau Ceti e. Tau Ceti is one of the closest stars to us that's believed to have an Earth-like planet, and is just under 12 light-years away in the Cetus constellation. With around 78% the mass of our Sun, it's otherwise a very similar star, and in 2012 researchers analyzed evidence that suggests there are 5 planets orbiting it. While most of them are thought to be too hostile or big to be similar to Earth, Tau Ceti e is a different story. It's about half the distance from its star than the Earth is from the Sun, and it orbits once every 168 days. It is, however, substantially bigger than the Earth, with estimates suggesting that it has at least 3.5 times the mass, but it's thought that the surface temperatures are on average around 154 degrees Fahrenheit. This would make it much warmer than Earth, and has led to speculation that it could be much more like Venus than our planet. It's still seen as a potential candidate for a habitable planet, however, and will be one of the first on the list to be studied when improved telescopes become available. Number 3. Kepler-452b. In July of 2015, the team responsible for the Kepler Space Telescope announced the discovery of a new Earth-like planet. It orbits Kepler-452, a star that's around 1,400 light-years away from us in the Cygnus constellation, and is known as Kepler-452b. The description of it as being Earth-like has been somewhat controversial because it's much larger, but some researchers believe it's an excellent candidate for having once had conditions very similar to those on our planet. It's thought to have a mass that's 5 times that of the Earth, and as a result of this size, its gravitational pull is likely twice what we're used to here. If it's made of rock and not gas like some people think, then it's probably very geologically active with volcanoes and earthquakes, and this would likely have produced quite a thick atmosphere. Its position around its star means that it completes an orbit in around 385 Earth days, and it's thought to have an average temperature of around 248 degrees Fahrenheit. This is, of course, far warmer than on our planet, and would mean that any water would have evaporated. But it hasn't necessarily always been this way. This star system is much older than ours by at least 1.5 billion years, and it could well be a premonition of what our solar system will look like in the future. As the planets slowly move closer to the Sun, the conditions found on Kepler-452b could be what's in store for the Earth. Number 2. Kepler-1649c. Kepler-1649c was described recently as being by far the most similar planet to Earth that's been so far found outside of our solar system. Its discovery was first announced in April of 2020, and it orbits a star called Kepler-1649, which is around 300 light-years away from us. NASA has confirmed that the planet is made of rock, and it's a very similar size to our planet with a radius that's just a tiny fraction larger. Unlike the Earth, Kepler-1649c's host star is a red dwarf, which is about a quarter of the size of the Sun. And this means that it has a much lower light and energy output. The planet is much closer to its star, though, with an orbit taking just 19.5 Earth days. But this still keeps it well within the theoretical Goldilocks zone, with just a slightly cooler environment that would allow for water to remain in its liquid form. As it's a relatively recent discovery, further research is needed to confirm just how Earth-like and potentially habitable it is. One of the most important things to understand is the behavior of the star it orbits. When they're in that stage of their lives, they often emit solar flares. This may not be a problem if you're as far away as we are from the Sun. But in the case of Kepler-1649c, it could be catastrophic. So far, no flare activity has been detected from the star, and it's constantly being watched to see if anything happens. If it's found to be a relatively low-activity star, then it's quite possible that an atmosphere is formed on the planet, which would also make liquid water a possibility, making this one of the strongest contenders to have been found for somewhere else that can sustain life. Number 1. OGLE 2018 BLG 0677LB. Detecting planets beyond our solar system is a complicated process. There are no telescopes that are able to visually see rocks orbiting other stars, but they are able to monitor the light emissions from a star and infer that something is orbiting it, based on the reduction of light that reaches us when something's blocking its path. Using a method like this comes with restrictions, and the further away a star is, the more difficult the calculations become. That's what makes OGLE 2018 BLG 0677LB so interesting, because it's currently the most distant Earth-like exoplanet to have ever been discovered. It was found by a team at the University of Canterbury and lies at least 24,722 light-years away from us and is near the center of the Milky Way. The star it orbits is much smaller than our Sun, with just over 1/10 of the mass, but the planet itself is thought to be as much as 4 times the mass of the Earth. It also has a much wider orbit, completing a single revolution once every 617 Earth days. As the star has a lower light and energy output than the Sun, and the planet is further away, you'd normally expect that the conditions would be far too cold for it to be considered Earth-like, and it would be almost impossible for water to remain in a liquid state, which raises questions around whether life could develop or be supported there. The size of the planet changes this to some degree, however. Because of its increased gravitational pull, it's far more likely to have attracted passing objects like asteroids and kept all gases within its atmosphere. If this has happened, then it's quite possible that it retains a lot of the warmth that reaches it, in a similar way to how the greenhouse effect affects the Earth, and this could make it comfortably habitable.